Hello and welcome to another edition of the LCM Show. I have with me the legend Marcus Johnson. He is a music producer, songwriter. Having started out singing with the world-renowned gospel choir LCGC in 1984, Marcus moved on to working in bands and songwriting with friends like Brian Powell and Mark Beswick, and ended up picking up a couple of gospel songwriter awards. Alongside Steve Campbell, Brian and Mark, Marcus also worked with the young Faye Simpson, Robert Anderson, and Andrew Smith, and they started doing shows supporting the likes of the USA's great Richard Smallwood and BB and CC Winans. They also performed on the main stage and the Greenbelt Gospel Festival with Sounds of Blackness, where he also met Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and have been a big influence on his career. Now, I've said all of that, and believe it or not, you think that's a lot to digest. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So I have Marcus with me, who's going to be an influence to you all, speaking about his life. So hello, Marcus Johnson, how you doing?
Hi, how's it going?
Okay, well, you know what? I'm all right. I know it's COVID, but I'm using the time wisely, and I'm sure you are as well.
This whole lockdown thing.
I know. So anyway, let's move on to the first question. On your bio, you said that you started growing in strength and in belief in the late 1980s when you went to LA with Brian Powell and when you worked with the likes of Daryl Coley, Earth, Wind and Fire, and the great songwriter John Lynn. So how did meeting these people...
Let me correct you. I didn't actually work with Earth, Wind and Fire. We hung out with them. We hung out with people like Daryl Coley and Earth, Wind and Fire, myself and Brian. But it was a great experience. We hooked up with a songwriter called John Lynn, who was a writer for Earth, Wind and Fire. He wrote stuff like Boogie Wonderland, and he wrote songs like Save the Best for Last. So we was able to hang out with him and pick up experiences, and he gave us a lot of tips about songwriting. It was kind of like he took us under his wings and kind of mentored us to a certain degree.
Right, so they were mentors for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about your experience in the early 90s when you came back to the UK and worked with Steve Campbell.
Well, you know what? Going to America was a great experience for myself and Brian, because we saw what the standard was. We saw how Americans worked, and I don't know if you know, but back then in the 80s, a lot of UK artists looked up to a lot of American artists. They set the benchmark, so a lot of artists were looking up to American artists. So going over there and see how they work was a great experience for us, because now we can pick up tips of how they do things and just work ethics.
Yes.
So we found in America that their work ethics was very intense. Everybody was into mastering their craft. Everyone was into being on top of their game and just being the best at what they can possibly be. And they didn't do things in half measures.
Yeah. So can you tell me, what was your experience with New Colours? How did you participate with them, and what was your experience with them?
Well, basically, New Colours was born out of LCGC. New Colours was originally called Colours of LCGC, and then eventually they kind of expanded away and become a separate entity. And you know, obviously, Lawrence Johnson, my brother, basically took that under his wings and ran with it. So they was in the process of putting out some records in the late 80s, and they put out a couple of independent records, and then at the time I was working with the Escoffreys. I was doing some demos for New Colours as amongst other producers. And basically what happened is, I was at a record company meeting, and A&R basically asked me what was I working on. I told him a couple of things. I said, I'm working with a gospel group called New Colours. And he goes, oh, let me hear something. And in turn, I played him some demos that we were working on at the time. And he was instantly interested. And then basically, to cut a long story short, they ended up signing New Colours.
Wow. I mean, to me, you come across as such a humble person. You know, you've worked with so many different brilliant singers and songwriters and producers. What did you actually find, that one thing inside of all these successful people that was common amongst them?
work ethic. I think that a lot of them were really hungry. You know what I mean? It's one thing being talented, but I think what most of these artists had in common was mastering their craft and growing and excelling. Where sometimes, you know, sometimes people don't want to put in the groundwork. A lot of artists are talented, but they don't want to put in the work. So the one thing that I found, especially like people like Beverly Knight, really, really strong workers in the studio, you know what I mean? Very passionate, you know, and they will keep going till it's done, you know what I mean? And even trying to better themselves at, you know, sometimes when you think it's done, artists go, I think I can do this better. So they were artists, all these common threads were, all these artists were driven.
Yeah, just prolonging it throughout, you know. Personally, I find as well, you know, I've been taught that when you've got a goal, even if it's just 5 minutes per day, just do something per day. It's the consistency, you know, as you said, just having that drive to do something on a consistent basis. Can you please tell me, there was something that happened in 1999 where you said that you formed a band with Jay Henry, who was a backing vocalist for George Michael. And in the band, you actually signed a 3-album deal with Warner Brothers. It was recorded in the UK and mixed in the USA. However, the album didn't seem to come to fruition due to internal changes with the label. Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, basically 98, prior before 98, I was having a lot of dealings with record company, A&R guys. And a guy called Colin Barlow, who was at Polydor at the time, basically put the idea to me, he goes, why don't you do a band? And I'm like, I'm a producer, I just produce records. And he goes, you guys are from church, why don't you, you know what I mean, it'd be nice, you know what I mean, it's not like you can't do this. So he kept kind of talking about the idea, and as he pushed the idea to me, I kind of warmed to the idea of the possibility of doing a group. So, you know, myself and Steve, we spoke, and then he was like, get yourself a lead vocalist. So we tried out various different people. I won't go into all the names who we went through, but we tried out a few different singers, and then we came to this final conclusion with the labels, and basically which was Jay Henry, basically. And then basically what happened is, even though Colin sparked the idea of that our band was called Seventh Son, and although Colin Barlow sparked the idea, basically what happened was when people kind of heard we were doing something, and then we had a flurry of labels all queuing up to sign us. So we had Warner's, we had EMI, we had an arm of Sony that came all in the interest to sign us. So it kind of sparked a flame, and basically we ended up signing with Warner's based upon they offered us a really good deal at the time. And we basically went away writing, making, basically just trying to find a concept. And our thing was we wanted to do something based on all our influences. The music was very eclectic. It was a kind of cross between soul, fusion, rock, without being so too contrived. We were trying to find this balance that kind of encompassed all the balances of our musical influences, basically.
Okay. So speaking about yourself personally, what do you think has made you successful in the music industry? I know that you did highlight about having that common drive. But, is there anything else you can add to, you know, what is it that has made you come to meet with people that have touched the world with their music, and for you yourself to be touching the world with your music? As so many songs that you've produced or co-written, they've done so well in the charts and you know, over America and different parts of the world in general. So what do you do to make yourself?
I would say that you have to love this. And the way I see music, I don't just see it as a job, I see it as a part of who I am. So to me, I don't switch off from music. I do, but I don't. So for me, I'm always ready. You know, music is part of my life, it's part of my DNA. So it's not like someone who works in an office or goes and works in a nursery and they come home to their family. For me, it's part of who I am. I can't separate the two. It's part of my life. It's embedded into the fabric of who I am. So when you're driven like that, you know, you're always ready. You're not, you know, so to people, Some people it's a hobby. It's this. To me, it's part of who I am, part of my purpose. So when you see it that way, then the rest kind of falls into place.
So
When
is
you're
it,
driven like that, that's where success comes from, because you don't distance yourself from it being part of who you are.
so what do you do is your downtime? Because you do this thing full time.
Mm.
So when you want to have a break or you want to relax, what's the key thing that you do?
For me, I just like probably sitting down watching some Netflix occasionally, playing around with my kids, goofing around. I come from a family that we're jokers, we're pranksters. So for me, I just, you know what I mean, we're just chill out, man. Just kick back, have fun, have a laugh. You
Yeah.
know, I
Especially,
like going for walks. I find that's a way for me to decode. I like going for long walks. After this interview, I'm actually going for a walk.
yeah, especially when you've got 5 children to keep you occupied. So I don't think you, or 6. Okay, I don't think your day is ever done.
Mm.
All right then. So just to sign
And
off.
also, Lorraine, I come from a musical family. My mum and dad were very musical. Before they were Christians, they used to play in bands. My mum used to sing in a band, and my dad used to play in another band. So we were always exposed to music. My whole family was exposed to music 24/7. Music was very much a centerpiece in our house. Growing up, my dad bought records every week. He told us about music, from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones to Fats Domino to Chuck Berry to James Brown. We had an encyclopedia through my dad telling us about music. So it was always around. It was never, I can't think of a time that I weren't exposed to music. And I came from a musical church in the sense of the Lorraine, which people like Baz and me came from. So we was always around great musicians, cutting edge influencers.
Yes. Okay. So I know now that the part of the life that you're living is being a mentor as well for musicians. Is that so?
Yeah.
So
And I think it's important for me. I think it's important to give back. You know, people gave to me over a period of time, and I think it's important to give back. I think when you give back, it's fulfilling. For me, you know, there's a lot of talent, but I meet a lot of talented singers, producers, but sometimes it's knowing how to navigate that talent. So for me, because I have some form of experience, I can pass on my experiences and say, yeah, what about this? What about that? So for me, it's important to give back.
okay, so the way that you give back, how would you inspire or speak to someone that is wanting to be a part of the music industry? What would you say to them?
I think you've got to be in an environment. So for me, there's people like Terry Walker, who before her career blew up, she was around myself and Steve, you know. So we've taken lots of artists before they've blown up, and they shadow us. Even producer Giant Killer, he used to be in the studio 24/7 with us. He used to go, "Can I carry your boxes? Can I carry your this? Can I come studio?" So we never really said no to people because we felt it was very important to give. So part of the journey is being in the environment. So sometimes the best thing how someone can learn is to be in an environment. Sometimes me just talking is one thing, but being in the environment, my kids are very studio savvy because they're around it 24/7. So they know how to set up a mic, they know how to record because they've seen it. It's just come second nature to them. So sometimes the best way to mentor someone is just to put them in an environment that they're shadowing you, they're around you, they see the process day in, day out. So it becomes second nature.
Okay, thank you. So what would you say to somebody that is simply saying, I've had enough of the music industry, it's too hard, it's the return that you get for all the investment that you put into it, there's not a good return on there, and they're just simply no longer wanting to be in the music industry? What would you say to them?
I would say to them, you know what, I think right now, the climate for music, some people look at it from a negative point of view. I see it as a window of opportunity because now with the internet, we're in an era where people can put out their music independently. The only thing that's missing is the power or the capital to promote your music. But I think people who are independent are in a better position because before, if you were signed into a label, and I've been on both sides of the fence, to me, the novelty of being signed is not a big deal for me anymore. And I think because based upon labels are going to take a big cut of people's, you know what I mean, earnings and stuff like that. So if you're an independent artist, you're in control of your own destiny as opposed to labels that's doing 360 deals where they're earning from everything that you do. If you get a shoe deal, they're taking that. If you're an independent artist, you don't have that control over you. You can do what you want. It's just, for me, I think it's very important as an independent artist to find your place in the market, because right now we're in a market that is saturated, and the problem is sometimes everybody's trying to do the same thing. So for me, if I was advising an artist, I say, find a place in the industry where nobody's doing what you're doing. And, you know, sometimes everyone wants to be a Beyonce, everyone wants to be Drake, or everybody wants to be Adele. You know what I mean? That's cool, they're great artists, but what makes them unique is that at the time they came out, no one really sounded like them. Where everybody tends to jump on the coattails of somebody, and it's like, I think Teddy Riley said it, it's important to be a leader, you know, because everybody follows the leader, but you know what I mean, when you're always following, you know what I mean, great people, if you look in the industry, the great artists set trends from Michael Jackson to Prince to Madonna, whoever you want to look at, you look at the common thread, they all set trends.
So can you tell me, when you're listening to a piece of music, what thing would you look for within the first 30 seconds to a minute for you to say, yeah, that's a great track?
Does it relate to me? Can I relate to it? That's the thing, you know what I mean? Because it's not rocket science, you know, if you're at a party or if you're at an event and someone puts on a great music, you see the response around the room, everybody, like you go to a wedding, people put on candy, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's that, I'm not saying every track needs to be like candy, but I'm just saying music has that thing where it's instantaneous. You know what I mean? Sometimes people think it's about, you know, how much money you spend on a project that's going to make it successful. What makes great records is great songs. Yeah. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how much you spent on it. What ultimately makes a great record is a great song. That's what I think people, they lean to, a great song. And sometimes I think it's important for songwriters and producers to put, if necessary, put the hook up the front of the song, because instantly you grabbed people's imagination, you grabbed their attention.
Well, I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you ever so much for being a part of the LCM show. It's been a wonderful privilege speaking to you.
It's a pleasure.
All right, then. You take care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.